Hello, my name is Grace Caggio. I'm volunteering with Pierce County Grassroots Organizing and working on the Nonpartisan districts for Western Wisconsin, the Fair Maps project that's happening in Wisconsin right now. And we have today a special guest. Tony Phillips is with us today, and I'll have him introduce himself right now.
Okay, thank you, Grace. Yeah, I'm a cancer doctor in Appleton, Wisconsin. I became involved in Fair Maps, Wisconsin over the last few months. I had the real pleasure and experience education of putting together a PowerPoint 72% to talk about the significant support, 72% or more of Wisconsinites that would like to see an end to gerrymandering. We're going to talk about that. And I think also I'm being interviewed because throughout my career, I have been a Republican in a state where currently gerrymandering is better for the Republicans, but I don't think it's better for anybody, and we're going to talk about that as well. So thank you for having me.
Thank you. So one of the things we like to do when we speak to people about this issue is to understand their own evolution with the concept, because many people, gerrymandering is new to them. They're not quite sure the impact that it has. So my question to you, Tony, is when did you first hear about gerrymandering? How did you feel about it? And how has your view of gerrymandering evolved?
Sure, thank you for that question. And I would say, again, over the last 4 to 5 years, I've started to wonder why does our government seem so dysfunctional? Why does it seem so unable to solve or even debate the basic issues that affect all of us, such as the atrocious national debt, the extremely high cost of health care in the United States compared with other countries, the lack of leadership in climate change. It seems like our politicians at both a federal and a state level, they're more interested in fighting one another. They're literally calling each other names rather than sitting together and solving the problems. I'd asked myself over the last few years, why can't our government be run more like a business? Why can't we make a list of problems? Let's look at our resources. Let's debate some solutions. Let's reach some consensus on a direction. So in trying to understand, what's causing this dysfunction, I learned quickly that one of the causes is gerrymandering. Over the past year, I've been hearing and reading more about gerrymandering. And I've learned about how over time, one of the biggest issues with gerrymandering is that it causes a loss of moderation in our state government. Therefore, it causes a loss of cooperation in our state government. The most recent examples of how our state government has been dysfunctional includes the fight over the April primary that led to long lines to vote and loss of absentee ballots, the haphazard approach to the COVID pandemic, which probably has delayed the state economy's safe reopening. This dysfunction is occurring because the politicians in the two parties, they refuse to work together. They refuse to sit in the same room and debate and compromise and come to a consensus. Why is that? Well, I think, again, a lot of it is due to gerrymandering and the fact that they're all in safe election districts. These politicians know they won't be punished for not cooperating or finding solutions. They'll get reelected anyway. So I'll stop there, Grace.
Well, so you feel very passionate about this, as we all do, and that direct connection between the dysfunction we're seeing in our government and these safe gerrymandered districts. So you made a presentation called the 72% presentation, and it's a fantastic resource for the people of Wisconsin. Why did you feel it was important, or maybe give a brief summary of this presentation so people know to look for it and watch it, but why did you feel the need to create this?
Sure. I mean, again, this would have been about January of 2020. I was starting to understand gerrymandering in Wisconsin, understanding that really it's probably the root cause of why our state government both appears to be and is actually very dysfunctional at this time. But gerrymandering and what it does to our politicians and to our government, how it removes moderation and problem solving for our government, it's hard to understand. It really is hard to understand. So I decided to write it out in a PowerPoint, really to help myself understand. And over time, I understood that it could be educational for others to help me be a better activist on this issue. So In January 2020, I was saying I need to get involved. We've lost moderation in government. We need to get it back. I knew gerrymandering was a part of the problem. It was a bad thing. So I started looking like, how do I get involved? I Googled, and that's where I found Fair Maps. Fair Maps. I learned about the 2019 Marquette poll that showed 72% of the citizens of our state clearly are expressing support for nonpartisan redistricting and into gerrymandering. Also from Fair Maps, I learned that coincidentally the same percent, 72% in Allegheny County in 2018 voted in a referendum to end gerrymandering. So with that, I obviously thought, well, 72%, that's a very large number. So that's a significant majority. So why do we still have gerrymandering? So the PowerPoint became an attempt to explain what is gerrymandering, why has it adversely affected our state government, why does it still exist if 72% or more of it want it to be gone. These are very complicated and wonky things and answers, but I think it's important because the presence of gerrymandering does pervade our life in a very negative way day to day. So as I was doing the PowerPoint, instinctively I began to hope it would become educational and empowering tool that for others who would want to take up this cause. I want to bring out, I think the hardest thing to understand about gerrymandering is how it's removed the ability to be a moderate in government on either side of the aisle. And how's that? Well, if I could just go to the PowerPoint a minute. Because of the gerrymandered districts, the November or general election is predetermined. The Republican in a Republican gerrymandered district, he's going to win, or he or she is going to win that district. A Democrat in a Democrat gerrymandered district, they are going to win that district in November. So the real fight becomes in August at the level of the primary. Whoever wins the primary in that gerrymandered district is going to win in November. So in a Republican gerrymandered district, the fight is for the August primary. Well, the important thing to know about this whole discussion is that there are fewer voters that vote in the August primaries. Only about 15 to 20% of voters vote in the August primary. These tend to be the more ardent, the voters with more extreme views on both the right and the left. The politicians are very smart, they understand this. So over time it evolves that to survive, to be reelected, you mainly have to pay attention to the 15 to 20% of voters in your party that are going to vote in the August primary. So this selects for more extreme views. It selects against moderation. So over time, that's what's evolved in Wisconsin. Gerrymandered districts have evolved and selected for more extreme views of the politicians and less cooperation between the two sides. So the 72% PowerPoint in summary tries to explain this very subtle but very important problem related to gerrymandering. So.
Thank you for creating this presentation. It's a tremendous resource and it helps us to communicate what the impact of gerrymandering actually is and has been and why we need to do something about it. So a question for you then, Tony. You're a Republican in a Republican gerrymandered state, Wisconsin, and it's uncommon for Republicans to be as outspoken as you are about the need to end gerrymandering here. Do you have a message for other Republicans in the state that may favor an end to gerrymandering but haven't chosen to be as vocal as you are?
Sure.
Or fear being as vocal as you are?
Well, I appreciate that question. Yeah, I do have a message for Republicans in Wisconsin, really both those that the great majority that do favor it into gerrymandering, but to all Republicans. I Googled, I looked up, what is the core belief of the Republican Party? And what Google says, the core belief of a Republican, the Republican Party, is centered on the idea that each person is responsible for their own place in society, that the government's role is to enable the people to secure the benefits of society for themselves and their families, and for those who are unable to do so for themselves. So I have been a Republican because I believe in what that says, that ultimately people need to find success themselves. They need to not live off society and the government. I'm conservative. I believe that makes me a Republican. But there's nothing in that definition of being a good Republican that says one has to think that gerrymandering is a good thing. Gerrymandering, no matter where it occurs, no matter what state, no matter what party is in power because of gerrymandering, is an insult. It's an insult to the idea of democracy. Gerrymandering makes a mockery of the voters. Those politicians that would try and defend or keep gerrymandering are therefore also insulting the idea of democracy, whichever party is doing so. And those politicians that are trying to defend gerrymandering, no matter which party, are most definitely making a mockery of the Wisconsin voters. The fact is, the great majority of Republicans in Wisconsin understand that gerrymandering is an insult and want to see it ended. 63% of Republicans in the 2019 Marquette poll favored into gerrymandering. In all of those counties that now are overwhelmingly voting to end gerrymandering, the very high percent would only be possible if the great majority of Republican colleagues are also saying yes to ending gerrymandering. So it's actually only a small minority of Wisconsinites and a small minority of Republicans in Wisconsin that feel gerrymandering should be continued. But here's the important point that I want to make to the Republicans. It is the silence and the acquiescence of Wisconsin, and especially the Republicans that know better, that's going to keep gerrymandering alive potentially in 2021. What defense do we hear being used by those who want to keep gerrymandering around past 2021? Do we see them standing up and shouting the benefits of gerrymandering? Are they holding up signs that say, let's keep gerrymandering? No, in fact, those that want to keep gerrymandering, they don't want to talk about it at all. They deny that gerrymandering exists. They certainly would not want to try and stand up and debate the merits of gerrymandering. But clearly these defenders of gerrymandering, which I agree in Wisconsin are currently the Republican Party leaders, are counting on the apathy and the silence and the lack of activism of the great majority of us Republicans that actually want to end gerrymandering. So my message to my fellow Republicans in Wisconsin would be, you can still be a very good Republican, you can be a very good conservative, but you can still hold accountable those politicians that would continue the atrocious practice of gerrymandering. Republicans are Americans first. We're Wisconsinites first. We're defenders of democracy first. And gerrymandering has no place on that list of what us Republicans in Wisconsin should be actively fighting for.
So thank you very much for giving that statement and that appeal. How can we, as voters, as the constituents, whether we're Democrat or Republican in a district, how can we hold our elected representatives accountable when their job is certain through gerrymandering? That's the struggle. How do we hold them accountable?
Well, I think we can only appeal to the higher ideal of democracy. You know, the legislature has the ability to draw the maps. The voters have actually relatively little power to influence the election district maps. All we can do is advocate, but we need to not be silent. You know, I think in 2011, the maps were drawn in secret. They weren't really publicized, it just occurred. So it's taken the state a long time to wake up. But also I think the negative effects of gerrymandering have occurred over time and therefore have awakened a lot of people, including myself. So this time around, we just need to be more awake. Next year, we have to be more active. We have to let our politicians know, look, you're not going to get away with this without knowledge of the public. And I think really that's all we can do. And that's like the purpose of the 72% PowerPoint and all the events that are being held and these Facebook pages and what you guys are doing. Ultimately, we just have to put more and more pressure on the legislature as it exists now. I think what's going to occur, the People's Map Commission is going to draw a more nonpartisan type of map. I think the Republicans in the legislature are going to pass some version of a relatively gerrymandered map. I think the governor is going to veto that map, and then the whole thing is going to go to court, which is unfortunate. It's gone to court 1981, 1991, 2001. It's just unfortunate that we have to go through that, the expense, the time, and it's not democracy. What I plan to do is hold up the map created by the People's Map Commission and hold up the map that is gerrymandered and say as many times as possible and to many people as possible, which map would you prefer? Which map do you think is better for Wisconsin and democracy, and in the long run, better for all of us in Wisconsin? And again, to the Republicans, I would say, you know, yeah, maybe in the short term, that's difficult for certain Republicans, but in the long run, I think the ideals of being a Republican, a conservative, they have to win over the voter. We can't artificially select ourselves and have power that is completely artificial. I think it's the ideas of being a conservative that are going to have to win over. And I think that can occur in the long run. And that's what I would like to see through a more democratic way.
Boy, I hear you. I agree with you. And appealing to those higher ideals and hoping that through ongoing pressure, the campaign that you're talking about, the strategies of communicating with our representatives and appealing to those higher ideals, hopefully we'll set that course. My concern is once people have made it through the primary, and we really need to recognize the importance of those primaries in selecting the candidate who maybe will stand up for those higher ideals, right, of democracy.
Right.
But once the candidate is selected through the primaries, that person in a gerrymandered district, as you say, is guaranteed their win for unless there's a landslide election, they're guaranteed that. And so when you're voting and there's so many policies and issues that matter to you, and you might look at a candidate and say, I agree with all your policy issues, except the gerrymandering one. I would like you to end gerrymandering. You haven't committed to that, but I like all of the other issues. You know, if you're a conservative, I like your conservative stances. And the struggle is to get people to prioritize that gerrymandering issue as so critical in their voting.
Well, I think, and I agree with you, but I think at the present time, through this election cycle, we really haven't found or recruited moderate candidates to run against Republicans specifically on the issue of nonpartisan redistricting. I've been involved also in that effort, and I can tell you it's been difficult. Part of the reason is we didn't really start it until 2019. It's a little too late. But I think very importantly, this can occur in 2022 if it needs to. I think this whole effort of this year, 2020, and next year, 2021, when the census results come about and there's discussion in the media and debate about, wait a minute, are we going to have a gerrymandering again? I mean, all of that sets up, to me, if needed, and I hope it isn't needed, but it does set up, if needed, a different environment leading up to the 2022 elections. You know, if need be, we need to recruit more moderate people who stand up and say, yeah, if you put me in, I will vote against gerrymandering. If you put me in, we're going to fix this permanently. We're going to create a non-legislative, non-partisan body to draw these maps every decade. And so I do think that's possible. I think that's probably the next level of the battle. You know, again, I hope it's not needed. I hope that in 2021, the legislature can be made to see that this is a future. Look, this is going to end. This is going to end eventually. You can't have 72% plus of the state want anything and keep it around when it's going to get more and more and more publicity over time. So, let's finish it now. But I agree, if need be, in 2022, we're going to recruit more moderates. I don't want to use the word Republican. Again, it happens to be in Wisconsin that, yes, the Republican leadership is the problem. The Republican Party is the problem. So it is going to have to be, if needed, in 2022, more moderate Republicans that are going to have to run for office saying, look, if you put me in, I will get rid of nonpartisan redistricting. I think that's possible.
So the public, you have me hopeful. So public pressure and really demanding it of the people who are running for office in whatever party they represent. It's an expectation we should set.
I do. I think, again, I'm sorry, my wife just walked in. But I think, this is not a static fight. This is an ongoing thing. I think the public is waking up. What is it now? 19 counties that have voted on this issue. 8 or 9 more this fall are voting on this issue. So I think the public is waking up to this particular issue. I think 2021 is going to bring a ton of publicity to this issue. So it's clearly going to continue to build the pressure on the legislators. And I have no doubt that it's not going to survive more than another couple years or election cycles. I really am optimistic about that. But, the fear would be, does it flip the other way? Because again, I don't want to let the Democrats off the hook. I mean, if we're going to solve this, it has to be bipartisan and it has to be both parties agreeing, okay, we're going to create a permanent, non-legislative, non-partisan solution that we will rely on every decade.
I'd like to think I've communicated with my representative on this issue, and that's one of the things I brought up. I mean, things don't stay the same. As you say, it's not a static issue. Things will swing, things swing. And someday the party that today is in power will not be in power. And if we keep a system in place with whichever party is in power gets to draw the lines, as you say, this extremism and polarization is just going to intensify and continue. And when I try to appeal to that and use that appeal, it's short-sighted. I get the sense my representative is not thinking that far ahead, just thinking about, the next few years and the power that they can, maintain. So yeah, it can go both ways. It absolutely can. And they should be thinking about that.
Well, I definitely agree with you. I don't know, it must be the nature of politicians. Iowa accomplished this in 1980. Since 1980, Iowa's had a non-legislative, nonpartisan way to draw their election district maps. So that ultimately is the goal here in Wisconsin. So we hope.
Janelle, do you have things you'd like to ask?
Yeah, I was just going to make the point. I think, Tony, you brought it up some in one of your answers, but the point that it really weakens both of our parties. So I think, the parties with gerrymandering tend to go to the more extreme. And for us to have healthy parties, we really need to represent the whole spectrum. So I think that, and that would work for both parties. We need healthy parties that can include the ideals of the parties and not attract people not win because of the way that the maps are drawn. So I think that concept of having strong parties that can really focus on the ideals and what they're trying to do, that makes our whole country stronger,
I think you're right. I think you're right, Janelle, and it brings back again the concept of moderation. And there's certainly data, that talks about the U.S. Congress and how it's lost moderation over the last few decades. And that's really what got me into it, was what is wrong with our federal government, but that's so big. Then I started also looking at, okay, what about our state government? And gerrymandering. And so that's probably an easier issue to tackle immediately, but the loss of moderation is horrible in the federal government.
I think it's a way to also appeal to our younger voters who are really disillusioned with the whole process and really recognize the lack of representation that they feel from the candidates that are put out there. And if we can help them to understand that a big part of this problem is the process by which districts are drawn, making that connection, that will help to increase the pressure perhaps candidates are feeling from their constituents.
No, I agree. You know, a lot of the reason I got into this the last few years is I'm getting a little older, going to retire, and I start to think about, you know, what are we leaving for our kids?
Mm-hmm.
What kind of system are we leaving for our kids? And you know, unfortunately, I don't look on it as a good thing what we are leaving, and so I'm trying to do what I can to fix it in the next few years.
Thank you. I think that's what's motivating many of us. Yeah, representative government, that's what we're told we have, then that's what we should have.
Good. Thank you, Grace, for your questions, and thank you, Janelle, for setting this up. I hope it can be helpful. I hope we can fix the lighting.
Yeah, this has been great. I think your answers are fantastic. Thanks for submitting that great question. And so I think, yeah, there a lot of great information. Really appreciate your perspective and being willing to talk to us. And I'm all for a strong Republican Party and strong Democratic Party. So I hope that's one of the outcomes that comes from ending gerrymandering in Wisconsin. So
I do want to ask you quickly, Tony, have you heard Dale and Tim speak? The two retired representatives. Dale Schultz is a Republican majority leader, and Tim, I'm forgetting his last name. Tim Collin was a Democratic representative in the state of Wisconsin, and they're going around the state arguing bipartisan arguments why we need to get rid of gerrymandering, and it's pretty powerful stuff what they're sharing. I don't know if you've heard from them.
No, I think I've heard of Dale Schultz and was aware he's relatively moderate and probably favors in gerrymandering, but yeah, maybe I'll try to Google their speeches or something to learn more. Right.
I would highly recommend it. Pretty powerful message, and it's coming from, you could argue both sides, it's coming from people who understand the value of working together. Good. Which is what our government needs to do.
That's what we need more of, obviously. So.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, Tony. We'll put this together. We'll share it all with you, and we'll probably, the longer form video that we'll put together will include Dale and Tim, so you'll get a glimpse of them as well, because I think you guys are making a lot of really good and similar points that are really powerful. So yeah, thank you so much, and feel free to reach out to us if there's any way we can ever support your efforts, and we'll look forward to getting all the footage to you.
Well, no, I appreciate your time, and I appreciate what you guys are doing in Western Wisconsin. Thank you so much. The more counties, the better, and good luck.
Thanks a lot. To you too. Take care, Tony.
Have a good day.
You too. Bye.
Bye.